Again, MP Chris Webb, no relation by the way, was mugged in London on Monday and his mobile telephone stolen. This is not the first time that an MP has been mugged in London. The same thing happened to Hugh Pilkington, the MP for Blackburn, in 1862. The course of events following his mugging, though, showed us how to deal effectively with the problem. The problem, that is, of violent young hoodlums roaming the streets. Even if those who mugged an MP a few days ago are apprehended, it's unlikely that the robbers will be discouraged from similar exploits in the future. Things were rather different in the 19th century, when street crime, in particular mugging, began to be a serious problem, particularly in London. By the way, mugging isn't, as many people seem to think, an Americanism, something imported to this country across the Atlantic in the 1960s or 70s. In fact, it's the other way round. The Americans picked up the expression from us. In the 1860s in Britain, the expression putting the mug on became synonymous with violent robbery in the street. The passing of the Security of the Persons of Her Majesty's Subjects from Personal Violence Act, sometimes later called the Garrotters Bill, signalled a new and hardening attitude on the part of both the legislature and judiciary to violent crime, and an attempt to counter one sort of violence with another. In short, those who hurt people would in turn have pain inflicted upon them to discourage them from acting so in the future. The Act, which provided for flogging with the cat o' nine tails as a penalty for robbery with violence, was introduced to combat a wave of muggings which swept through the largest cities of England in the 1850s. The muggers were known as garrotters because they typically worked in pairs, one grabbing the victim around his throat and choking him, while an accomplice rifled through the pockets of the helpless victim. The activities of the garrotters turned into what is sometimes known as a moral panic, when society became persuaded that some dreadful evil was befalling it, and that a certain type of crime or particular sort of person needed to be tackled. Transportation to Australia was coming to an end at that time, and some criminals were being released from prison after completing just part of their sentence, a common practice today, one that's recently been extended. But in the 1850s it was regarded as a new and dangerous experiment. The idea took hold that it was these ticket of leave men, let's say those released on parole, given early release, who had been given remission from their sentences, who were chiefly responsible for the outbreak of violence on the streets. Something needed to be done, but nobody could think what, other than the obvious expedient of increasing the length of the prison sentences given to such people when caught. Some were given 20 years and others life with hard labour, but the street robberies continued. In the early hours of Wednesday, 16th of July 1862, Hugh Pilkington, Liberal MP for Blackburn, was walking home from a late sitting of the Commons. As he passed the Reform Club in Pall Mall, two men rushed him, knocking him to the ground. As he lay there stunned, his watch was snatched, and the two robbers sprinted off into the darkness. Hugh Pilkington had not been mugged in some dark alleyway in a seedy part of a provincial town. This was one of the grandest streets in the heart of the capital, a few hundred yards from Buckingham Palace. Seeing one of their own fall prey to the crime wave galvanised Parliament into action. The response was the Security of the Persons of Her Majesty's Subjects from Personal Violence Act, more commonly known as the Garrotters Act. Before the passing of this act, muggers had usually been prosecuted under Section 43 of the Larceny Act, which provided for a maximum sentence of hard labour for life for anybody convicted of robbery with violence. The new Act was punishable with both lengthy prison sentences, but in addition, up to 50 strokes with the cat. The cat o' nine tails had been used for years in the British Army and Navy. It consisted of a wooden handle, which was 19 inches long, attached to which were 9 cords, each 33 inches long. It was applied to the bare back of the person being punished and caused a tremendous amount of pain. During the 19th century, newspaper reporters were allowed into prisons to witness both executions and floggings. For this, there are a number of reasons. And for this reason, there was a number of vivid descriptions of just what garotters faced when they were caught. On 17th of January 1867, 2 men who had been convicted under the Garrotters Act each received 24 strokes of the cat before being locked up for many years. The scene in York Prison was a grim one. The prisoner was fastened to the triangle by straps at ankles, knees and hands, and a leather band was placed around his neck to prevent the lash hitting the victim in that part of the body. 2 warders of the jail, who administered in each instance 12 strokes in succession. According to a newspaper reporter, the first descent of the whip made him cry "oh" in a piteous tone, and the second he cried out "oh dear." After the 4th he begged for and was given a glass of water, and at the 9th he resisted so strongly, though without the least avail, that the framework to which he was bound was moving slightly from its original starting point. As the blows followed each other in quick succession, his cries of suffering were louder and more frequent. It was in vain that he asked for mercy. In a dreadful paroxysm of pain, he promised he would never do so again. After the 24 lashes had been given to the 2 men, they were allowed to return to their cells. That's the way to deal with muggers. It will surprise nobody to learn that the wave of muggings subsided rapidly after flogging began, as soon as those responsible realised that they were liable to have pain inflicted upon them. It sounds a fairly brutal and primitive solution to a problem, but in actual fact, bullies and violent people are often more scared of having violence inflicted upon them than anything else. It's entirely, I wonder what viewers think. Do they think that if modern day muggers were threatened with being flogged like that, it might discourage a few of them? I've got an idea it would.